Team synced. Tango's marked. Smoke out.
Bucking the usual trend of breaks between numbered sequels, Call of Duty Black Ops 7 is following just 12 months on from Black Ops 6, and you'd perhaps assume that meant only small tweaks to what was one of the series' high points last year. But the teams at Raven and Treyarch evidently don't see it that way, and have instead built one of the most unconventional COD campaigns to date. In many ways, it doesn't feel like a COD single player mode. It's more like a multiplayer experiment squeezed into a campaign shell, playing best when you're accompanied by squadmates, echoing zombies or the now-defunct DMZ at times. But it all culminates in a brand new endgame portion that stitches together aspects of COD's past open world successes and failures in an attempt to become something new. In reality, that post-credits content is a repetitive shooting gallery that adds little to the excitement that leads up to it. I recently criticised Battlefield 6's single player for playing it safe and not taking any risks, and to Black Ops 7's credit, the same can't be said here. The problem, however, is that not many of its big swings hit, resulting in one of Call of Duty's most intriguing yet flawed campaigns. Much of Black Ops 7's intrigue emanates from one fundamental design choice. For the first time in many years, a Call of Duty campaign is fully playable in 4-player co-op, and it really does feel like it's made with that in mind as the preferred method of play. This comes with both positives and negatives. Teaming up with friends is good fun, with fighting big bosses that have multiple weak points to fire upon simultaneously, or stealthily working through an enemy area tactically, both coming with a good deal of satisfaction.
Nice and quiet.
But it also detrimentally affects the solo experience. From not having AI companions fill in for you if no buddies are online, or kicking you for inactivity if you're idle for too long, to not even being able to pause due to its online-only nature. Its open areas and endgame portions seem catered towards a group experience as well, and can end up just a little lonely when zipping around by yourself. To an extent, it feels like Activision is finally admitting that most people come to its hallmark shooter for multiplayer fun, rather than the single-player story modes the series was founded on. There are also no difficulty options this time around, meaning that, in theory, it should scale the threat depending on how many players are in your squad. In my experience though, the number of enemies in a level remains the same, leaving me feeling overwhelmed by foes even in its earliest levels. By comparison, playing in a full squad makes these encounters a breeze, with not enough targets to go around sometimes. In fact, enemy numbers are uneven across the campaign as a whole, sometimes swarming you with dozens of rabid rushers, but at others presenting you with a couple of soldiers wandering through a door when you're expecting an onslaught. It's admittedly a difficult balance to get right, but one that has not been achieved here. As for the structure of the campaign, Black Ops 7's story is delivered at breakneck speed, taking me just about 5 hours to reach the endgame. Its 11 missions threw me through one exotic location to the next, from one time period to another, and deep into nightmare realms full of otherworldly horrors and delights.
Your suffering only brought us closer together.
Fuck you!
The year is 2035, and new threats are here to instigate a global collapse once again. The re-emergence of Black Ops 2 villain Raul Menendez thrust the playable unit Spectre 1 into action and soon has them facing off against an evil tech company called the Guild. What follows is a set of missions that throws you in and out of reality thanks to a fear toxin being weaponized by the Guild, led by Kiernan Shipka's Emma Kagan, who is trading in Mad Men for Mad Mechs here.
Initiate testing sequence.
A combination of cliched evil sci-fi tech corp and Batman Arkham Scarecrow-esque antics leads each level to interesting places from a visual perspective, as long-buried memories of our protagonists are dredged up and morph into horror-filled mazes. I do wish there was a little more in terms of mission variety when it comes to actual level and objective design though, with corridor shooting taking the lead in most of these excursions. If last year's Black Ops 6 leaned more into grounded espionage and subterfuge, 7 is a much louder proposition proposition, choosing to demolish the lobby of a complex to gain access to it rather than sweet-talking the security guard standing in front of it. As a result, there is no shortage of big moments justifying its blockbuster label. Dodging giant falling machetes like you stumbled into a Looney Tunes cartoon is a one-off joy, as is taking control of a lavish luxury boat and ramming it into the side of a building. Moments like this feel pinched right out of Christopher Nolan's back pocket and sit perfectly in the Call of Duty mold. And that's just the opening of one of the standout missions, which takes place in Tokyo and has you dipping into its subway systems and leaping across rooftops. There's a great sense of forward momentum to levels like this, and I'm a massive fan of them. I just wish the campaign were more like this Japanese chapter, as I'm not so keen on the ones taking place in the more open zone areas of the fictional city-state of Avalon, which struggle to bottle the same exciting energy. These typically have you moving across wider patches of its map in order to chase the next cluster of enemies to take down, and essentially serve as tutorials for its endgame. In fact, much of the time, it doesn't really feel like a Call of Duty campaign at all. Yes, it has the militaristic hallmarks, but borrows just as much from horde shooters like Left 4 Dead and its own in-house zombie modes. It makes for an uneven set of missions, some of which really don't work for me, but with others that do manage to hit the spot when they capture some of the COD cinematic legacy. As you might expect, the gunplay is snappy and satisfying, with SMGs delightfully ripping through armoured enemies and sniper rifles really coming into their own and popping out bits of brain in some of the campaign's open areas. The firearms are supported by a fantastic selection of skills and gadgets too, with kill streaks making their way into single player, such as the joyously destructive War Machine, allowing for quick mob cleanups. I'll admit, I was initially skeptical of the near future setting and Call of Duty's return to tinkering with near future tech when it comes to movement, but on the whole, the experiment is largely a success. Wall jumping can be a little clunky, but the kinetic super jump is very fun to use as a quick flanking tool, as is my favourite of the bunch, the grapple hook. Swinging up to roofs to find a better vantage point before swooping down on a wingsuit to get back up close opens up each level's architecture in interesting ways. It may never reach that Titanfall 2 gold standard when it comes to FPS mobility, but there are flashes of it here, which is always welcome. This desire to experiment also carries into its approach to boss design, which is by no means revolutionary when it comes to FPS campaigns, but a relatively new thing for Call of Duty. I appreciate the efforts made in order to make each have its own gimmick, even if they all ultimately come down to draining an oversized health bar while dodging projectiles. In fact, enemy variety is quite impressive this time around, with human, mechanical and hallucinatory foes offering different threats that challenge you at all distances. Guild forces include a robot army, as well as traditional militia types such as the machine gun wielding raiders, colossal armor plated titans and other NFL team adjacent units. Yes, most can be handled with some well aimed assault rifle fire to the head, but there are more effective ways to deal with them if you choose to explore your arsenal. After the main story's credits have rolled, you're offered a chance to experience its epilogue, which takes place in the open region of Avalon that's teased throughout. If you played Call of Duty's DMZ mode, then you'll have a rough idea of what to expect here. It's an extraction shooter, except it's not. You and up to 3 friends can team up and drop into this battle royale sized map and complete the activities that litter it with eye-soaring regularity. On every street corner are guild checkpoints or zombie infested buildings to clear out as you progress through its difficulty tiered regions in order to reach its final boss, located at the epicenter of the island's toxic smog. The catch? If your squad goes down, you lose all of your progress. That progress is mainly tied to your combat rating, a number that goes up the more killing and map icon clearing you do, and it's therefore up to you to know when to call it quits on a certain run and extract from the map within a time limit. In theory, I like this idea and think there are the bones of an exciting mode here, something that could capture the magic the likes of Helldivers 2 has done in recent times. But as is, it unfortunately gets a little tired a little too soon. Objectives are almost all exclusively go to this place and clear out the enemies here, which I understand is part of the fundamentals when it comes to shooters, but I would have appreciated a little more variety and something that mirrored the minor puzzle solving sections of the main campaign, or at least clever uses of the gadgetry asymmetry it introduces. All semblance of interesting level or mission design is traded in upon entry here for a few hours of relatively mindless shooting in order to watch some numbers tick up. In some ways it sits somewhere between the campaign missions and zombies in its design, but frustratingly borrows the least interesting aspects of both, neglecting the mission structure and mystery solving that each mode thrives on. It results in a reasonably enjoyable but not essential second serving to the campaign. And don't worry if the endgame doesn't sound like your cup of tea or even sounds a little daunting, the ferocity of its bullet sponge hordes can get overwhelming in its latter stages, especially when heading in solo. The story does wrap up satisfyingly enough beforehand for it to not feel like you're missing out on an ending completely.
Sniper! Well, no need to rush things. I've got nowhere else to be. And you've got nowhere left to run.
Where's the sniper? She's up. Oh shit, lost visual.
It's a story nowhere near as accomplished as last year's efforts though, effectively a direct sequel to Black Ops 2 that also ties into the events of Black Ops 6, presumed knowledge and the speed at which its setup is told can be a little disorientating, especially if you aren't familiar with its 2012 predecessor. The themes are personal this time around, with David Mason placed centre stage as he battles with his past, namely the loss of his father Alex. There are some fun revelations along the way as well as treats for long-term fans of the Black Ops series, but as someone who has personally never held those characters in as high regard as their Modern Warfare counterparts, the pulling of the heartstrings doesn't quite work for me. That being said, if you are someone who has always preferred the adventures of Woods, Mason, Adler and co, I'm sure you'll have a great time here. It does mean though that this revisiting of the past, combined with a thick layer of exposition, can make the early hours of the story relatively impenetrable for newcomers. So I'd bear that in mind if you're coming in fresh.
Stop looking backwards, David. What matters is what you do next.
Call of Duty Black Ops 7's campaign is a wild one thanks to the scope of its ambition. Not every roll of the dice pays off, but there's enough enjoyment to be found across its 11 missions to not feel like a dud, at least when played in its desired co-op fashion. Beyond that, its endgame has the seed of a good idea that could be nurtured with future efforts, but it comes across as a little repetitive and supplementary to the story Black Ops 7 is trying to tell. With satisfying gunplay and very fun movement abilities providing solid foundations, there's a reasonable mix of styles on show here, even if it doesn't fire on all cylinders 100% of the time. Despite being a step down from last year's exhilarating Black Ops 6 campaign, it certainly takes some big swings. They just don't always land. It's not bad, it's not good, it's simply okay. For more from Black Ops 7, make sure to stay tuned for our full zombies and multiplayer reviews, and for everything else, stick with IGN.